Customer states, yeah, I had a fuel leak for a while, but I fixed it myself 2 weeks ago and it lasted until yesterday. The mechanic who pulled this one into the shop found a turbo setup underneath the car that could only be described as a one-of-a-kind piece of art. This car was in after the owner said that it had started sounding like a redneck beer car ever since their grandfather had attempted to install a new exhaust system on it but had forgot to use his good glasses and ended up cutting things that he shouldn't have. I know what's wrong with it, it ain't got no get. The owner of this Jeep had been hearing a clunking sound from the rear for a few weeks and had asked their father-in-law to have a look. He said everything seemed fine, but the mechanic had a slightly different opinion. The owner of this car had just purchased it 4 months before and was now in for a new wheel bearing when the mechanics discovered something quite interesting. This customer had installed a lowering kit on their car but had forgotten to tighten a couple of parts. This is how you know a customer has been to a shop that should not be allowed to be in business. This taxi car rolled in because it had some issue with the taxi light that sits on the roof, and the mechanics discovered that someone had wired it in a pretty creative way, to say the least. And this customer came in for a tire rotation when the mechanic noticed the state of the brakes. When told about it, the customer apparently just said, "I knew you were trying to screw me over, I'm going to another shop next time." The owner of this car had it in at a different shop to replace a couple of transmission gaskets, as it was leaking transmission fluid all over the place. Turns out that the other shop had a pretty rough way of working on cars. The owner of this Toyota Sienna rolled into the shop because of a brake leak after he had tried replacing brake calipers, brake rotors, and pads by himself, but had just made a mess. Why have only one brake pad in each slot when you can have two? And this customer came in saying, "Did some suspension work together with my buddy the other weekend, but now the car feels like an older gentleman rocking a hula hoop on the back of a moving truck." This guy was renovating his vintage Jeep that he just purchased for $25,000 when he discovered that the undercarriage was naturally aspirated. This Dodge Ram 1500 was in because the owner had a noise at all speeds, and especially when turning, after they had done some work on the suspension, and this is what the mechanics found. And the owner of this car came in for an oil change, and when asked about what the strange device on the back of his truck was, he said that it's a fuel flux capacitor boost generator that he apparently built himself and that improves gas mileage by making his fuel consumption travel backwards in time. The mechanics were doing an oil change on this car and found the front spoiler held on by what looked like every plastic clip the owner could find at the hardware store, and a sticker just to let you know he means business. The owner of this Toyota came in because he keeps hearing a dunking sound when he hits the gas after he had replaced some gaskets on the differentials not too long ago. Customer states, heard a loud crunk sound from the engine, but kept driving it. Does not think it's the water pump because those should last the entire service life of the car. And this Citroen C3 urgently came in because it had suddenly started running rough and was no longer able to start. The mechanics found that the engine had overheated and turned itself into a frozen yogurt bar in the process. Customer states, hit a speed bump going a little faster than I probably should have, and now there's a knocking sound. Can you check it out? And this Volkswagen Tiguan rolled in after the owner had installed a new engine control module, all by himself, but had apparently left a little something something in the turbo intake pipe. Customer states, just need some new brake pads. The calipers are fine, I just had them checked recently. This car came in with a total drivetrain after the customer had gotten stuck in a mud hole and had tried to jiggle his way out by slipping the clutch while at the same time flooring it. The customer ended up getting a new driveshaft, transmission, and fuel tank installed. This is the definition of a horrible car owner, someone that never cleans their car and drives it around without any shame, looking all beat up. This vehicle came in with quite the leak. The owner of this car had been on his way to visit some family a couple states over when he noticed the car running a bit hot but figured it was probably nothing. Actually, it was not nothing. Smoky, smoky. The owner of this truck was in because he said that he keeps having to switch car batteries every couple of weeks and had no clue what to do. The mechanic found out that someone had helped him replace the serpentine and generator belts not long ago, but had forgotten something. Customer states, rattling noise at idle after I hit an inflatable duck on the highway. Please advise. And this customer came in saying the clutch felt a little loose, but was pretty sure it just needed adjusting. The mechanic pressed the pedal and then opened the brake fluid tank only to find it full of surprises. And when your transmission starts transmitting parts all over the place, it might be time to have it looked at. Customer states, installed a new air filter myself, but car now feels a bit sluggish. Customer states, needed to get the alternator out of my Honda, started pulling a few things, but not entirely sure how to get back from here. Customer states, car's leaking oil from somewhere, but isn't exactly sure where. The mechanics discovered that someone had removed the old valve cover gasket, but not installed a new one. The owner of this car came in because he had installed a new sound system in his car and said that he wasn't great with electronics, so he called in his father-in-law, who gladly helped him out, but now he needed a new battery. The owner of this Chevy Silverado 2500 came in saying, a buddy of mine changed the wheel bearings a while back, but now the truck feels different. Please advise. And this car came in with a pretty loud clunking noise from the drivetrain, and when the mechanic cracked open the transfer case, it had apparently been making its very own mechanical Caesar salad in there, and the only thing missing was the dressing. And this car was towed in because it wouldn't start after it had been sitting in a barn for a couple of years and a couple of mice had snacked on some of the wires. And this guy came in saying that he slammed on the brakes to avoid hitting a garbage can. Looks like he slammed them pretty hard. The mechanic pulled the transfer case cover on this one and found the gears inside had seen much better days. Whatever service interval this thing had, it had blown past it a long time ago. Customer states, gave his car a pack of Montego Reds and now it can't get enough. And this car rolled in on a tow truck because it had a broken CV axle after the customer said that they had started hearing a strange noise not too long ago, but had just kept on driving. Customer states, hit some tumbleweed that appeared out of nowhere while on my way back home from a vacation trip. Please advise. Customer states, bought it from a guy up north who said it had been sitting in a heated garage. Should be almost 100% clear of rust, he said. And this customer said that his son had borrowed his car and hit a curb doing 75 miles per hour. The mechanic who popped the hood on this one found the battery looking like this. Turns out another shop had done a bit of a creative installation job and things had gotten a little steamy since then. Customer states, weird sound whenever they step on the gas pedal. Thinks there's something stuck underneath their vehicle. And this customer said that they needed a new headlight, so they installed one they found at a local scrapyard, but had to come in a few days later because they didn't have any high beams. The owner of this truck apparently decided that stock ride height just wasn't gonna cut it anymore. Interesting. This Ford F-150 rolled in because it had a loud engine knock, even though the owner had constantly been topping the engine up with engine oil, but still couldn't for the life of him figure out what was causing it. The owner of this car had installed a new sound system by themselves, but had to come in because they get a bad cough when turning up the volume. The mechanic unscrewed the oil cap on this Honda engine and found that the camshafts had a unique DIY protection system. And this car came in because it had started to run hot and smoke was coming out of the grill. Customer complained about a strange, strong smell, especially during idle, and wanted it looked at. Turned out that someone had recently adjusted the valves for the customer, but damaged part of the valve cover in the process, so oil had been leaking onto the outside of the engine, which was the cause of the issue. And this customer had installed a new sport exhaust by himself, but said that the brakes now felt mushier than usual and wanted it looked at. This customer had been on his way to pick up his son from a weekend hockey tournament when he noticed the temperature rising. The coolant reservoir came out covered in blue crystals, like something that shouldn't have been in there had been in there for quite a long time. And this car rolled in after the owner said his wife thinks she hit something on her way to yoga class, and this is what the mechanics found. Customer states, car clunks and is difficult to drive in a straight line after another garage repaired the rear control arm. And the owner of this car said, recently had an oil change at another shop, but is it really supposed to smoke this much during cold starts? When the mechanic went to open the trunk on this old Ford minivan, he found that someone had engineered a one-of-a-kind trunk release system by running a wire out from behind the model badge, through a small hole and down to the trunk latch. The owner of this car came in with a pretty decent coolant leak after he had tried fixing it himself using some duct tape. This Cadillac Escalade rolled into the shop because it had a horrible grinding noise from the transmission. The mechanic found that someone had worked on the transmission and had strangely plugged one of the washer fluid hoses into the transmission, which had caused the transmission to get flooded with washer fluid every time the customer went to wash their windshield. And this engine had some pretty expensive issues. This car came in with an oil leak that the owner couldn't trace. The mechanic opened the hood and found the oil cap just dancing on top of the fill hole. Customer states, nickel knackle knuckle sound from engine. This mechanic had finished doing an oil change on a customer's car, but had to help another customer and had let the intern reinstall the drain plug and splash shield for him, but it went a bit so-and-so. And this customer had fixed a leaking tire, but had to come in because it was now leaking more than before. This customer came in saying their steering wheel has been shaking at highway speeds and wanted it checked out. The mechanic found the inside of the tire looking like this. The owner of this car came in for a loud grinding noise at all speeds. The mechanic found that the customer had been driving on a spare tire for about 3 months, which was installed the wrong way, and that the spare had caused some major damage to the car's brake rotors and brake calipers. This guy had tried fixing a hole in his tire by creating more holes in it and sealing it with some duct tape. Great work! Customer states, oil leak. I think I found your problem, sir. And this customer came in as there's a weird sound coming from underneath their truck when they accelerate. The mechanic discovered that the drive shaft was really beat up, and when asked about it, the customer said that they had just been towing a horse trailer up a hill not too long ago. Uh-oh. The owner of this car had apparently been hearing a loud clunking sound for a few weeks before things took a more dramatic turn. The mechanic got underneath it and found the drive shaft looking like this. Customer states, engines telling knock-knock jokes again. Customer states, clutch has started to rattle during idle and it feels kinda weird shifting gears. This truck came in for a pre-purchase inspection, and thank God for that, because the current owner had apparently told the buyer that the truck was as good as new underneath. This vehicle was brought in because of a loud clunka-dunka sound from the rear, and when the mechanic got under it, he found that both lower control arm mounts had completely rusted away from the frame. How to tell if your car is an oilaholic. And we finally found some footage of the instructor who's been teaching all quick lube shops on how to do an oil change. Customer states, took the car off-road for the first time, but afterwards it wouldn't move forward or backwards anymore. This customer had apparently been holding off on new brake rotors for a while. The mechanic pulled the wheel and found a rotor that had worn itself all the way down to the ribbing underneath. When this car rolled into the shop for some bodywork, the customer said that he had been driving on a small private road out in the forest and had pulled over next to a house to take a picture of a tree, when the house owner suddenly ran out and started arguing with him and then ended up chasing him with a boomstick as he was driving off. And this customer came in with their Sierra Hybrid complaining about a rattling sound when driving and lots of warning lights in the dash after another shop had done some exhaust work on it the weekend before. Customer states, wife borrowed the car and hit a curb. The owner of this car came in saying that it had started to handle like Jack Sparrow at 4:41 a.m. trying to make his way home from the local pub. And the owner of this Volkswagen rolled in saying, no matter how much power steering fluid I put in this thing, it's never enough. Also, it's been overheating lately and I have no clue why. Turned out that the customer had topped up the coolant tank instead of the power steering tank and that they had a pretty bad coolant leak as a result. This car rolled into the shop because the owner said that they can feel the car leaning heavily to one side when driving. Eventually, the customer confessed and said that he had recently tried doing some repairs on the rear suspension while at the same time playing beer pong with his friends in the garage. This customer had made and installed their very own engine splash shield, but had to come in because of a noise at higher speeds. The owner of this car had called up a buddy to come give them a jump, and it seemed like everything was going fine. And this customer wanted his car insurance company to install two-way dash cams for him, but they refused, so he just ended up doing it himself. This car had some belts replaced by the customer's father-in-law, who's apparently great with cars, but came into the shop 4 days later because of a whining noise. The mechanic who popped the hood on this customer's car had a pretty interesting morning. Whoever had done the oil change had been very generous with oil, and the neighbors, well, they apparently knew about it before the owner did. The owner of this Golf rolled in because he could barely get it into any gear anymore. He also said that he normally parks it on the hillside street right outside his apartment. And this customer came in because their car had started giving off a whining sound from the back, and they also had a steering wheel vibration at higher speeds. This Ford Focus just rolled in because it had starting issues, occasional knocking sounds, and really bad suspension, even though the owner said that he had recently repaired it himself. The owner of this car had been towing it behind their RV and had forgotten to disengage the handbrake, and this is what that ended up looking like. And this customer came in saying that they did some suspension work on it, but that it now felt worse than before. When the mechanic grabbed the wheel and gave it a rock, the CV axle was moving along with it. And this customer came in complaining about a vibrating steering wheel and a muffled sound, but the mechanics couldn't find anything wrong until they actually removed the tire from the rim. And the owner of this car came in saying that he gets really itchy when driving longer distances and thought it might be something with the material in the seats. This car came in for a new serpentine belt when the mechanic popped the hood and found the alternator just hanging out. This truck came in after the owner said it was really hard to start and had started to backfire ever since they installed a new timing belt, all by themselves. And this mechanic drained the oil on a nearly brand new car and found it looking more like iced coffee than motor oil. This car had pretty bad starting issues, and the owner said that he had tried installing a subwoofer in one of his doors, but that it had not gone entirely to plan. This Ford F350 rolled in because it had started to run pretty rough according to the owner, and it turned out that it last had an oil change 48,000 miles ago. This Toyota Tacoma came in after the owner's son had done some maintenance on it. The engine dipstick was almost covered all the way to the handle with oil, but the transmission pan on the other hand had nothing in it. This car rolled into the shop because it had a bust CV axle because the owner had been going 100 miles an hour on a countryside road. This car came in for an alignment, but the customer had no complaints whatsoever about the brakes. The owner of this jet ski was pretty sure it was just a battery issue and that he'd be back out on the water by the afternoon. The mechanic reached inside and found the entire engine sitting in water. Customer states, "My dinosaur needs an oil change." Customer states, "Does all regular maintenance by the book and does it himself, complains about high gas mileage and wants us to diagnose the problem." The mechanic drained the car of oil and noticed it hadn't been replaced in a long time, and this is how the oil pan looked like. Customer came in saying that a friend of theirs had helped them install some new belts, but that they now have pretty bad squeaky noises coming from the engine and their dash looks like a lit up Christmas tree. This mechanic had this car in for a brake concern and found the brake caliper was not properly secured, which caused the wheel to lock up as soon as the customer started driving. This customer rolled in saying that his car has started running rough and knocks a lot, after another shop had done a valve spring replacement not too long ago. The mechanic didn't have to look for long to find out that the customer needs a new head gasket amongst a few other things. The owner of this car came in because his car ran rough after he'd let a guy from Craigslist install a new timing belt for him in exchange for a crate of 12 chickens. And this car came in because it needed a new spare tire, but when the mechanic had the car in the shop, he discovered that the trunk was a little crowded. The mechanic who opened the hood of this car was greeted by a pretty catastrophic engine failure that required a full engine rebuild with all new internals. Unfortunately for the customer, they had to pay everything out of pocket. This customer came in with their car after they had, quote, pimped it out for the bush and just wanted the mechanic to have a look at it to make sure it all looked solid before heading out on a little adventure. The owner of this truck came in saying, "My wife borrowed the car to go grocery shopping last week, but ever since the car has had this strange clunking sound. Could you check it out?" The owner of this 2021 Volkswagen T-Roc had just picked it up off the lot the day before and was on his way to show it off to his friends when the car just stopped going anywhere. The mechanic opened it up and found the clutch looking a bit tired. And if you thought that slicks are only used on racetracks, you'd be surprised at how much they're actually being used in regular traffic. The owner of this Mercedes had apparently been driving on a tire that had started coming apart at the seams for a while. One of the loose threads had wrapped itself around the suspension and decided to stay there. This vehicle rolled in because the engine was running really poorly and had started to run pretty hot. Turns out that whoever did the last oil change, which was only 2 months ago, had put a mixture of ATF and engine oil into the engine, and told the customer that they had done an engine flush to increase fuel efficiency. And this customer said, "Car clunks hella bad, ever since wife borrowed it to get some groceries and hit a pothole on her way back home." Customer states, "My car's been running a little warm lately, but I think it's just the weather." This truck came in right as the customer was about to pay $9,450 in cash for it, but the mechanic thankfully helped the customer dodge a pretty rusty bullet. This Chrysler 200 rolled in because the owner complained about it idling really rough after they had changed the throttle body at another shop the week before. Customer states, "I've got a couple of wires that I need replaced. Can you get it done before lunch?" When your transmission starts making caramel drizzle milkshakes, you know it's going to be an expensive repair. This car was in for an oil change, but when the mechanics had it on the lift, they noticed that the suspension was literally falling apart. And this customer had done their own tire rotation, but had to come in because the car had started to feel a bit wobbly when driving. This customer came in saying their brakes had started making a strange sound and the pedal felt a little mushy. Turns out the brake pads had just fallen out of the caliper entirely. This customer's car came in with a really loud engine rod knock, and this is how the oil looked like. Customerstates did some engine work at another shop, but ever since, car idles at a higher RPM. Please check and advise. This customer came in saying that they had a clunking sound from the front end that had been getting worse over the past few weeks. The mechanic found the control arm looking like this. Customer states, engine runs bad, wants a thorough inspection. The mechanics drained the car of oil and discovered it was also full of coolant and transmission fluid. Upon further inspection, they noticed that there was a giant bird-shaped hole in the radiator and transmission cooler, as well as a bad head gasket, which had ended up causing the perfect storm. Luckily, the customer's insurance company covered all the repair costs. The owner of this car said he always does regular maintenance on it and that he does all his own work. But lately he's been hearing a strange noise and wanted it looked at. And this customer came in saying that he needs new tires and that the mechanic maybe just have a look at the back end because his buddy said it might be a little rusty. This customer had changed the transmission oil in their Snowcat's gearbox, but had forgot to put new oil in and came in because it now refused to move forward or backward. This car came in with a cat anti-theft sticker on the side, but when the mechanic lifted it, he found the catalytic converter was gone anyway. I guess stickers are not that scary after all. This fleet car is operated by a company that does frequent inspections on construction sites to maintain workplace safety. But they had been so caught up inspecting other workplaces that they hadn't noticed they'd been driving around with a car full of concrete for about 8 months. This guy had his father-in-law do some work on his truck's parking brake, but now said he kinda regrets it. The mechanic who got underneath this one found something that would have made a plumber jealous. There was enough brake line coiled up under the hood to run a small irrigation system. This customer was in with their forklift because it would occasionally shut off on them after they had done a little quick fix repair job on the battery using a thin copper wire and lots of electrical tape. Nah, they got a couple more miles on them, no problem. The mechanic found the wheels on this SUV looking like this. Turns out the wheels had been drilled out to fit a car they were never really meant for, and the customer had driven it like that for quite some time. And this customer had done the yearly service on his Ferguson tractor all by himself, but had to call in a mobile mechanic because he couldn't figure out why the tractor now had starting issues. Turned out that he had the air filter the wrong way. The owner of this car came in saying, "There's a rattle whenever I accelerate, and the oil pressure has been a bit high lately. Could you check and make sure it's nothing serious?" When the mechanic cracked open the engine on this one, he found a valve seat that had decided to go on a little adventure. Apparently, it made it as far as the piston before the trip ended. And this customer's vehicle had started to make some extra creamy dark chocolate fondue after it hadn't gotten an oil change in over 55,000 miles. This customer came in complaining about clunking sounds after they had replaced the lower control arms by themselves. The owner of this car rolled in saying, "I had a tiny little drip under the car, so I fixed it myself. But I still have to top up the oil here and there, so I just want to make sure I don't need to fix it again." This car rolled in after the four-wheel drive had suddenly stopped working, as the customer had been going up a muddy 30-degree hill while out on a camping trip. This customer asked the mechanic, "But how do you know that I have a grinding noise?" It ain't hard to tell, sir. This car came in with a bit of an oil pressure problem after the mechanic noticed something a little more interesting than just low oil on the dipstick. And this car rolled in for an emissions test wearing some very street legal homemade slicks. Original! And the owner of this car came in because his truck was still leaking oil, even after he had paid another shop $500 to sort it out. They apparently even reassured him that there was zero chance of any future oil leaks. And this customer said that their engine temperature gauge only goes up to about 20% and the engine never reaches full temperature, and this is what the mechanics found. Customer states, car has had troubles moving for a while. Please check and advise. Customer states, my Fiat won't turn anymore. It just kinda goes wherever it wants to. The owner of this car had done some electrical work on it and had disconnected the battery, but had been a bit careless when reinstalling it, so a piece of the battery mount had welded itself onto the positive battery post and caused a series of other electrical problems for the customer. If you enjoyed this video, please hit the like and subscribe for more. Thank you for watching, and until next time.